moved into the studio apartment on a gray Saturday in late September, the kind of day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you. The building was an old factory conversion downtown, exposed brick, high ceilings, industrial windows. It had character, and more importantly, the rent was almost too good to be true. I should have known better. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked my boxes, arranged my furniture, and started settling into the rhythm of the neighborhood. The building was quiet, mostly older tenants who kept to themselves. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, so I spent most of my time in that little studio, the brick walls becoming familiar companions. It started on the 8th night. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone before sleep, when I heard it. A sound coming from the wall beside my bed, rhythmic, steady, organic. At first, I thought it was pipes. Old buildings make noise. Everyone knows that. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening, I realized the pattern was too regular, too deliberate. It sounded like breathing. Inhale, 4 seconds. Exhale, 4 seconds. Over and over. I sat up and pressed my ear against the cold brick. The sound was clearer now, unmistakable. Someone or something was breathing inside my wall. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Ventilation system, air pressure changes, water hammer in old pipes. But none of those explanations could account for the organic quality of the sound, the way it seemed almost purposeful. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I became hyper-aware of that rhythmic breathing, rising and falling like a tide against the shore of my consciousness. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off sometime after 4 a.m. The next night, I heard it again. Same wall, same rhythm, same 4-second intervals. I decided to mention it to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who'd lived in the building for decades. She had a weathered kindness about her, always offering tea when I passed her in the hallway. I caught her by the mailboxes one afternoon and casually brought it up, trying to sound lighthearted about it. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. The color drained from her face, and her hand gripped the edge of her mailbox so tightly her knuckles went white. "Which wall?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I described the location, the brick wall on the east side of my unit, the one adjacent to what I assumed was a shared utility space. Mrs. Chen closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. Then she told me the story I wish I'd never heard. The building wasn't always residential. In the 1,960 seconds, it housed a private psychiatric facility, one of those places that didn't ask too many questions and operated with minimal oversight. In 1967, there was a fire. Electrical, they said, though some suspected arson. During the evacuation, one patient disappeared. A man named Thomas Garrett, 43 years old, diagnosed with severe catatonia. His body was never recovered, never found in the rubble or the surrounding area. The official report concluded he must have fled during the chaos and died elsewhere. But Mrs. Chen had heard different stories from longtime residents. Stories about sounds in the walls, stories about scratching, about breathing. "People don't stay in your unit long," she said quietly. 6 months is the record. I forced a laugh, tried to play it off, but her expression remained grave. She touched my arm gently before walking away. "Be careful," she said, "and if it gets worse, don't wait, just leave." That night, the breathing was louder. I lay in bed, staring at the brick wall in the darkness, and I could hear it clearly now without pressing my ear against the surface. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. The rhythm never varied, never paused, like a metronome keeping time with something I couldn't see. I started sleeping on the couch on the opposite side of the studio, as far from that wall as I could get. But distance didn't help. The sound seemed to follow me, or maybe I'd just become so attuned to it that I could hear it from anywhere in the apartment. Then I noticed the scratches. I'd opened my closet to grab a jacket, the closet that backed up against the breathing wall, and saw them. Fresh gouges in the drywall, 4 parallel lines running vertically, like someone had dragged their fingernails down from inside. I stood there, frozen, staring at those marks. They hadn't been there the day before. I was certain. I placed my palm against the scratched drywall. It was cold, unnaturally so, and I could feel a faint vibration, a rhythm I recognized immediately. Something was breathing on the other side. Something was scratching, and it was getting closer. I called my landlord, demanded he check the space behind the wall. He was dismissive, annoyed, told me it was impossible, there was no accessible space there, just brick and insulation. When I insisted, he finally agreed to send someone the next day. But I didn't make it to the next day. I woke up at 3:24 a.m. to a sound that still haunts me, the sound of drywall cracking. I turned on every light in the apartment and approached the closet slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see into the darkness beyond. The drywall panel at the back of the closet had been pushed outward, bowed from pressure behind it. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, and behind it, in the darkness of whatever impossible space existed there, I could hear it, breathing, closer than ever. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. And beneath that, a new sound, the slow, deliberate scrape of fingernails against wood. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and I ran. I didn't pack. I didn't look back. I left everything, my furniture, my clothes, my entire life packed into that studio, and I never went back. The landlord kept my security deposit, said I'd breached the lease. I didn't care. I didn't argue, because some sounds you can't unhear, some presences you can't ignore, and some walls are breathing for a reason. I still dream about it sometimes, that rhythmic sound, the scratches, the darkness behind broken drywall. And in those dreams, I always wonder, what would have happened if I'd stayed one more night? What was trying so desperately to break through? I don't want to know. I've been driving long-haul trucks for 8 years, crisscrossing the Midwest on routes I know like the back of my hand. I-80, I-90, I-70, these highways are my office, my meditation, my life. In those 8 years, I've picked up maybe 40 or 50 hitchhikers. Most are down on their luck, grateful for a ride and some conversation. I've heard 1,000 stories from the side of the road, and I've never had a problem. Until last October. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. I was westbound on I-80 through Nebraska, that long stretch between Lincoln and North Platte where there's nothing but darkness and the occasional cluster of distant farmhouse lights. The road was empty, just me and the endless white lines disappearing under my headlights. That's when I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder, his arm raised calmly, thumb out, not waving frantically like most hitchhikers do, just standing there with his arm extended like he'd been waiting specifically for me. He wore a suit dark gray, dress shoes, tie, and all, which immediately struck me as odd. Nobody wears a suit to hitchhike on a highway at midnight in Nebraska, but I've learned not to judge. People end up on the side of the road for all kinds of reasons. Car breaks down, fight with a spouse, bad decisions, so I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet past him. In my mirror, I watched him walk toward the truck with measured, unhurried steps. He climbed into the passenger seat and nodded politely. "Appreciate the ride," he said. His voice was soft, educated, with a slight southern accent I couldn't quite place. He looked to be in his mid-50s, clean-shaven, neatly groomed. Not what you'd expect from someone stranded on the highway. "Where are you headed?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. "Next truck stop," he said. "About 50 miles west. If that's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," I replied. "I'm going that way anyway." We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. I tried to make small talk, asked him where he was from, what brought him out here. He gave vague answers, nothing specific, always redirecting back to neutral topics. The weather, the emptiness of Nebraska, the quality of the road. Then, about 20 minutes in, I noticed him checking his watch, not casually, deliberately, every 2 or 3 minutes, glancing at it and then at me. The third time he did it, I felt the first tingle of unease crawl up my spine. "You on a schedule?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Something like that." Then came the questions. "You have family?" he asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Brother in Iowa, parents in Minnesota. They expecting you home soon?" I paused. That's not a normal question. "Eventually," I said. He nodded slowly, still smiling that flat smile. "You check in with anyone? Dispatcher? Company GPS tracking?" Every alarm in my brain started ringing at once. Those aren't idle questions. Those are predator questions. Assessment questions. I kept my voice steady and lied. Yeah, actually, GPS on this rig tracks my location in real time. Company policy. And I call my brother every night around midnight. He's a state trooper. Likes to make sure I'm safe. Should be calling him in about 10 minutes, actually. I watched him out of my peripheral vision. His entire demeanor shifted. The smile vanished. His jaw tightened. He stopped looking at me and stared straight ahead through the windshield, his hands folded rigidly in his lap. We didn't speak for the remaining 30 miles. The tension in the cab was suffocating. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I kept glancing at the passenger door, wondering if it was locked from the inside, wondering if I could reach my phone faster than he could reach me. Every muscle in my body was coiled, ready. When I finally pulled into the truck stoplights blazing, other trucks idling, people visible through the diner windows, I felt like I could breathe again. He opened the door immediately, not waiting for me to come to a full stop. "Thanks for the ride," he said flatly, without looking at me. Then he climbed out and walked away, not toward the diner or the restrooms, but toward the shadows behind the building where the dumpsters were, where the lights didn't reach. I sat there for a full 5 minutes, my heart still racing, before I could bring myself to move. Then I did something I'd never done before. I searched the passenger side, under the seat, in the door pocket, between the seat cushions. That's when I found it, wedged deep between the cushion and the seat back, deliberately hidden. A folding hunting knife, 4-inch blade, the handle wrapped in black electrical tape. My blood went ice cold. I called highway patrol immediately. They came, took my statement, took the knife. The trooper who interviewed me looked at the blade for a long time before bagging it. "You're lucky," he said. Real lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt sick. Later that night, I got a call from another driver in my company, a guy named Dave who ran routes parallel to mine. He'd heard through dispatch that I'd reported an incident, and he wanted to warn me. 2 weeks earlier, Dave had picked up the same man. Same stretch of highway, same suit, same soft voice. Dave said the guy had asked similar questions, but Dave hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was only after dropping him off that Dave found the knife. Dave had reported it, but the man was gone by then. No cameras had caught him clearly. No ID, no name, just a ghost in a suit on the side of I-80. Then Dave told me the worst part. 4 truck drivers had gone missing along that corridor in the past 3 years. 4 men, driving alone, all found abandoned in their trucks at rest stops with no signs of struggle. No blood, no bodies, just empty cabs and missing drivers. And in 3 of those 4 cases, witnesses had reported seeing the driver pick up a hitchhiker shortly before they disappeared. A man in a dark suit. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I don't care how desperate they look, how legitimate their story seems, because I know now what I couldn't see that night in the darkness of my cab. I was being hunted. And if I hadn't lied about that GPS tracker, about my brother, the state trooper, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Somewhere out there, on some empty highway in the Midwest, a man in a suit is standing on the shoulder with his thumb out, waiting for the next driver who doesn't ask the right questions. I hope to God it's not you. I've been hiking solo for 6 years, and I'm not reckless about it. I research trails thoroughly. I file itineraries with friends. I carry GPS, satellite messenger, the works. I know the risks, and I respect them. The wilderness doesn't forgive carelessness. Last September, I planned a 3-day backcountry loop in the North Cascades, a moderately challenging trail I'd been eyeing for months. The weather forecast was perfect. The route was well documented, and I'd studied the topographic maps until I could see them with my eyes closed. The first day and a half went exactly as planned. I made good time, the views were stunning, and I had the trail almost entirely to myself. On the second day, around 2 p.m., I noticed something unusual. Someone had tied bright red fabric strips to tree branches at irregular intervals along the trail. They were fresh nylon material, vivid crimson, impossible to miss. I stopped and examined one closely. It was tied in a simple knot, about 6 feet off the ground, the loose ends fluttering in the breeze. I checked my guidebook and GPS. No mention of trail markers like these. The official blazes were standard Forest Service markers, white diamonds on trees. These red strips weren't on any map. My first thought was that maybe a ranger had marked something temporarily, or another hiker had created personal waypoints. But the spacing was odd, and they led away from the main trail at an oblique angle, into dense forest where the underbrush looked almost impassable. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I'd follow them for just a little while, see where they led, and turn back if things got too off trail. I marked my position on my GPS and started walking. The red strips continued, appearing every 30 or 40 yards, guiding me deeper into forest that grew darker and thicker with every step. Branches clawed at my pack. The ground became uneven, studded with roots and moss-covered rocks. But the strips kept appearing, deliberate and bright, like breadcrumbs through the wilderness. After about 30 minutes, the forest opened into a clearing, and that's when my stomach dropped. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, maybe 8 feet in diameter, arranged with obvious intention. And inside that circle was a pile of objects, personal belongings, scattered like offerings. I approached slowly, my heart beginning to pound. Wallets. 3 of them, leather worn with age. ID cards, some still in plastic sleeves, a woman's watch with a cracked face, car keys on a faded keychain, a cell phone, old model, screen shattered, reading glasses, a wedding ring. My hands were shaking as I crouched down to look closer. I picked up one of the ID cards, wiped the dirt off with my thumb, and I recognized the face. It was a missing person case I'd read about online 6 months earlier. A hiker named Sarah Kaplan, 34 years old, vanished without a trace on a solo trip in this general area. Search and rescue had looked for weeks. They found nothing. I was holding her driver's license in my hand. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was looking at a collection site, a hunter's trophy cache, and then I heard them. Footsteps, branches snapping, not from one direction, but from multiple points around the clearing, north, south, east, deliberate, rhythmic, closing in. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted back the way I'd come, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me, my pack bouncing violently against my back. My lungs burned. My GPS was useless. I just ran in what I hoped was the right direction, back toward the main trail, back toward safety. But the red fabric strips were gone. Every single one of them had vanished. I was running through forest with no markers, no trail, no idea where I was. I checked my GPS with shaking hands. The saved waypoint was there, but I'd somehow gotten turned around. I was heading in the wrong direction. The footsteps were still behind me, steady and unhurried, like whoever or whatever was following me knew I was already lost. I changed direction, bushwhacking through thorns and dense brush, blood pounding in my ears. I kept running till my legs gave out, until I collapsed against a tree, gasping for air, until the footsteps faded into the distance. And then, by sheer luck or providence, I stumbled out onto a gravel access road. 20 minutes later, a park ranger's truck came around the bend. I flagged it down, nearly sobbing with relief. The ranger, a woman in her 40s, name tag reading Martinez, took one look at my scratched, bleeding face and torn clothing and immediately put me in the vehicle. I told her everything. The red markers, the clearing, the items, Sarah Kaplan's ID, the footsteps. Her expression went from concerned to grave to something I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "We've been tracking illegal activity in that area for months," she said quietly. "But nobody's ever been able to give us a specific location. We found evidence, but never the site itself." She asked if I could lead them back. I tried. God, I tried. I spent 2 hours with a team of rangers and law enforcement, poring over maps, describing the terrain, marking approximate locations. But I couldn't find it. The GPS coordinates I'd saved put us in a section of forest that looked nothing like where I'd been. No clearing, no stone circle, no red markers. It was like the place had vanished, or like I'd never been there at all. But I was there. I know I was. The scratches on my face were real. The dirt under my fingernails was real. And somewhere in that forest, Sarah Kaplan's driver's license is still sitting in a pile with the belongings of God knows how many other people. I haven't been back to the Cascades since. I can't. Because I know what's out there now, just off the trail where the maps don't go, where the red markers lead you into places you can't find your way out of. And I know someone is still out there, tying those strips of fabric to trees, waiting for the next curious hiker who decides to follow them. I just hope it's not someone you know. My sister Emily died 3 years ago in a car accident. She was 26. A drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon while she was driving home from work. She died at the scene. Our family was shattered in ways I still don't have words for. I kept her number saved in my phone. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Sometimes, late at night when I missed her unbearably, I'd pull up her contact and just stare at it, her name, her photo, that number I'd called 1,000 times. The line had been disconnected months after her death, returned to the carrier's pool of available numbers. But I kept it there anyway, like a digital gravestone. Last month, I received a voicemail from her number. It came at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I woke to the notification light on my phone, pulsing in the darkness of my bedroom. Half asleep, I picked it up and saw it. One new voicemail from Emily. My heart stopped. My hands started shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. I told myself it was a glitch, a technical error, someone else who'd been reassigned her old number. But every rational explanation evaporated the moment I pressed play. 20 seconds of static, crackling and hollow, like wind through a tunnel. Then, beneath the static, breathing labored, ragged, desperate, and then her voice, faint and distorted, warped like a recording played at the wrong speed. Michael. My name. She said my name. And then, don't come home. The voicemail ended. I sat in my bed in the darkness, the phone pressed against my ear, my entire body numb with shock and terror and grief that tore through me like broken glass. I listened to it again, and again. Each time, that distorted voice saying my name, that impossible warning. I called the number back immediately. It rang, and rang, and rang. No voicemail prompt, no disconnection message, just endless ringing that stretched into infinity. I barely slept the rest of that night. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was a cruel prank, some sick person who'd gotten Emily's old number and somehow learned about me. But that didn't make sense. How would they know my name? How would they have a recording of her voice? The following night, it happened again. Another voicemail at 3:47 a.m., this time longer. 35 seconds of that same crackling static, the same labored breathing, but the message was clearer. Emily's voice, panicked and urgent. Michael, he's still there. He's still there. Check the basement. Then silence. I played it over and over, my mind racing. Check the basement? What basement? I lived in a second-floor apartment. But my parents, they still lived in our childhood home, the house where Emily had grown up, where she'd lived until she moved out at 23. The house with a basement. I called my mom at 7 a.m., trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to sound insane. I asked if everything was okay at the house, if she'd noticed anything unusual. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Actually, she said slowly, I've been hearing noises for a few weeks now. Footsteps in the basement, late at night. Your father thinks it's the old furnace, but I don't know. It sounds different. Ice flooded my veins. I told her I was coming over. I didn't explain why. I just said I needed to check something, and that she shouldn't go down to the basement until I got there. I drove to my parents' house, a 40-minute drive that I made in 30. My mother met me at the door, confused and worried. My father was at work. I asked her if she had a key to the basement door. She did. I told her to call the police. She started to argue, to ask why, but something in my expression stopped her. She made the call. While we waited for the police to arrive, I stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the darkness. The door had been closed. My mother said she always kept it closed now because of the noises. The police arrived, 2 officers, both looking skeptical when my mother tried to explain. But when I mentioned the voicemails and played the recordings for them, their expressions changed. They went down to the basement with flashlights and weapons drawn. My mother and I waited upstairs, holding hands, listening to their footsteps and muffled voices below. They were down there for almost 20 minutes. When they came back up, their faces were grim. Ma'am, one of them said to my mother, you need to come with us outside. and you might want to stay somewhere else tonight. Behind the furnace, in the crawl space that ran beneath the addition my parents had built 15 years ago, the police found evidence that someone had been living there: a sleeping bag, food wrappers and water bottles, a battery-powered lantern, and dozens of photos of my family, taken from inside the house over what appeared to be months. My mother in the kitchen, my father reading in the living room, photos taken through bedroom windows at night. They never found who it was. No fingerprints, no DNA, no cameras had caught anyone entering or leaving. Whoever it was had vanished, probably when my mother started mentioning the noises, probably when they realized they'd been noticed. But the voicemails didn't stop. I still get them. Not every night, but often enough. Always at 3:47 a.m., always from Emily's number. Sometimes they're warnings. Sometimes they're just her voice saying my name. Sometimes it's just static and breathing. I don't listen to them anymore. I can't. But I can't bring myself to block the number either, because some part of me, some desperate, grieving part believes it's really her. That somehow, from wherever she is, she's trying to protect me. The police had no explanation for the voicemails. The carrier had no record of them in their system. According to their logs, her number is still disconnected and hasn't been reassigned. But my phone doesn't lie. The voicemails are there, time-stamped and real. I moved my parents out of that house. They're living with me now while we sell the property. None of us can go back there. None of us can sleep knowing that someone was watching us, living beneath our feet, for months, and none of us can explain how Emily knew. I lie awake, sometimes at 3:47 a.m., staring at my phone, waiting for it to light up, and when it does, when her name appears on my screen, I don't know whether to feel comforted or terrified. Because my sister is dead. I buried her 3 years ago, but she's still trying to protect me, and I don't know what that means, or what she's protecting me from, or if the thing in the basement was the only danger she was trying to warn me about. All I know is that the voicemails keep coming, and I'm too afraid to stop listening. I took the night security job at an empty corporate office building because I needed the money, and because, honestly, it seemed like the easiest job in the world. Midnight to 8 a.m., 5 nights a week, completely alone in a locked building. Walk the floors every 2 hours, check the doors, monitor the cameras, make sure nobody breaks in. Simple. The building was a mid-rise downtown. 8 floors of generic corporate spaces, law firms, accounting offices, consulting groups. Everyone cleared out by 7 p.m. By the time I arrived at midnight, the place was a ghost town. The first 2 weeks were mind-numbingly boring. I'd make my rounds, drink coffee in the security office on the ground floor, watch shows on my phone, do my patrols. The only sounds were the hum of HVAC systems and the occasional creak of the building settling. Then I started noticing him. It was around my 3rd week. I was reviewing the lobby camera footage during a quiet stretch around 4 a.m. when I saw movement on one of the screens. I rewound the feed and watched it again. A man was standing outside the glass entrance doors, motionless, staring directly at the camera. He wore a dark coat, hands in his pockets, his face pale in the harsh glow of the exterior security lights. He didn't knock, didn't try the doors, just stood there, perfectly still, for about 30 seconds before the timestamp jumped and he was gone. I felt a small chill but dismissed it. Probably a homeless person, maybe drunk, wandering the empty downtown streets. But the next night, he was there again. Same time, 4:06 a.m. Same spot, same motionless stance, staring at the camera. I started keeping closer track. I went back through archived footage from the nights I'd worked previously, and my stomach sank as I found him in every single recording. Every night I'd been on shift, he'd appeared outside those doors at almost exactly 4 a.m., always in the same position, always staring at the camera. How had I not noticed before? I reported it to my supervisor during a shift change. He barely glanced at the footage I showed him. Probably homeless, he said with a shrug. Downtown's full of them. As long as he's not trying to break in, it's not our problem. But it felt like a problem. Something about the way the man stood there, the absolute stillness, the way he stared into the camera like he was looking directly at me, it made my skin crawl. The following night, I decided to confront him. At 3:55 a.m., I positioned myself in the lobby, standing back from the glass doors so I'd be in shadow, watching the street outside. My heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. I kept checking my phone, 3:57, 3:59, 4, and at exactly 4 a.m., he appeared. He didn't walk up. I didn't see him approach. He was simply there, standing in the same spot he always occupied, maybe 15 feet from the glass. The exterior lights cast harsh shadows across his face. He was older than I'd thought, maybe 50, gaunt features, eyes sunken and dark. And then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was slow, deliberate, the kind of smile that reaches the mouth but never touches the eyes. And then he raised his hand and pointed directly at me. Not at the camera. At me. My blood turned to ice. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. And that's when I noticed something that made reality tilt sideways. I could see my own reflection in the glass doors behind him, a faint ghost image superimposed on the darkness outside, but his reflection wasn't there. I could see him clearly through the glass, standing on the sidewalk, pointing at me with that horrible smile. But the glass showed no reflection of him at all, as if he were something the mirror couldn't capture, something that existed but didn't quite belong to the physical world. I spun around, my heart exploding in my chest, and he was inside the lobby with me, less than 10 feet away. Same dark coat, same gaunt face, same terrible smile, now illuminated by the dim emergency lighting that ran along the baseboards. He shouldn't have been there. The doors were locked. The building was sealed, but there he was. I opened my mouth to scream, to shout, to say something, but no sound came out. My legs felt like they were filled with concrete. The man took a step toward me, his movements wrong somehow, too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding rather than walking. And then everything went black. I don't remember what happened next. My memory has a hole in it, a gap of time that I can't account for. The next thing I clearly recall is waking up in my chair at the security desk, my neck stiff and aching, light streaming through the lobby windows. It was 8:15 a.m. I'd lost over 4 hours. My hands were shaking as I checked the camera footage, pulling up the feeds from the early morning. I found the timestamp where I'd been standing in the lobby, 4 a.m. I watched myself on the screen, standing there, looking toward the doors, and then the footage glitched. Static filled all the camera feeds simultaneously, a wall of white noise and digital distortion. When the feeds cleared, it was 8:03 a.m., and I was slumped in my chair at the desk. The entire night's footage from 4 a.m. to 8:03 a.m. was completely corrupted, gone, as if those 4 hours had been erased from existence. I quit that same day. I didn't go back for another shift. I didn't even pick up my final paycheck. I just walked out of that building and never looked back. Later, when I'd worked up the courage, I did some research. I called the security company and asked about the guards who'd worked that position before me. The HR rep was hesitant at first, but I pressed, said I'd experienced something unusual and wanted to know if others had reported similar issues. There was a long pause on the phone. "The guard before you quit after 3 weeks," she finally said. "Something about feeling uncomfortable during the night shift. And the one before him, we found him unconscious at the security desk one morning. He couldn't remember what happened. We thought maybe he'd had a medical episode, but doctors couldn't find anything wrong." My mouth went dry. "Did he see anything?" Before he blacked out, another pause. He mentioned something about a man in the lobby, but the cameras didn't show anyone. We assumed he'd been dreaming, or maybe hallucinating from exhaustion. I thanked her and hung up. I still drive past that building sometimes, during the day when it's full of people and light and normalcy. I look up at the lobby windows and wonder who's working the night shift now, whether they've seen him yet, whether they've noticed the man who appears at 4 a.m. and stares into the cameras. And I wonder what happened during those 4 hours I can't remember. What did I see? What did he do? Why did he let me wake up? I don't have answers. All I have are gaps in my memory, corrupted footage, and the bone-deep certainty that something in that building wanted me to stay. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is. But it's still there, waiting in the empty hours of the night, pointing at the next person who thinks a night security job is easy money. And if you ever find yourself working alone in an empty building at 4 a.m., I have one piece of advice. Don't look at the cameras, because some things look back.